And welcome to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor here at Whiskey Politics. And we are in a brand new studio this week. We'll talk a little bit more about that over the next few weeks. Wherever you are, hope you're doing well in this new world we're living in. This idea of social isolation is new for most of us. And most importantly, I hope you're healthy. And we're going to be talking a lot more about the economy over the next few weeks. We got Stephen Moore, Trump economic advisor, coming on our next show. So you definitely want to stick around for that. But right now, we're in the new Crave News studios. You can see the bar behind me right here. And we're very excited as there's a lot of, just good stuff happening, and we're going to be talking about that as well down the road. But today, I wanted to talk about, well, what else? But, this whole idea of a pandemic and how it's impacting us, not just the economy, but us socially as well. And I'm delighted to have with us today's guest, Barak Lurie. Barak is not only a talk show host on 870 on the AM dial in Los Angeles on the weekends. That's a fantastic station, and a lot of great conservative talk radio stars populate that station as well. He is an attorney at Lurie and Seltzer, I believe it is, and he is also the best-selling author of two books. The first book is Atheism Kills, and his latest book is Rise of the Sex Machines. Barak Lurie, how are you? Social distance, we're not going to shake hands.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me, and this is incredible. The studio is empty here. And we are in a time right now which I was telling you before we went on the air that I was having a discussion with my kids last night, fighting the hordes at the supermarket to get the ration goods that, my father, he grew up in World War II London. He had the bombs falling on his head. He was worried about actually being killed outright. So with everything that we're having to deal with right now, I think a little bit of perspective is a good thing. What do you say?
Of course, we have to have perspective. For many people, it is so novel, this idea that they would have to ration food, like you just mentioned, or to think in any way that they might lose their jobs, that it's a completely different world. We've never experienced this in America ever. I think it's actually novel in America, in world history for that matter, but it's going to be a real shakeup. Yeah.
I'm deeply concerned. I'm somewhat of a lay economist. Your clients are business people, yes, real estate people. Right. You're very successful in Los Angeles, one of the most successful cities in the country, if not the world. What are you hearing right now from the business community and from clients regarding what they're foreseeing over the next few months here?
Well, what I've noticed actually is that people are pretending as though it's not happening, for one thing. They are making reference to the corona situation, but only when they want to have a delay in payment to, let's say, their partner or something like that. They make a reference to it, but they don't say, look, it looks like we're going to have no business in the future and I really want to hold back on my funds. That will be coming, of course, but I think right now, they're not really talking about it the way that you might expect it. That might happen in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. So the idea that I think whenever you're watching this is being recorded at the end of the first technical week of lockdown in the state of California, that is. A lot of people are suggesting that, the idea of 2 or 3 weeks is, we've got to get used to the idea that this may actually be months. What does that do? President Trump, we talked about this earlier, he was given an option, okay? People die, hundreds of thousands or millions or whatever the numbers may be after the trajectory goes up, or you got to turn off the economy. I don't blame him for the decision, but how much of an impact from your perspective do you think this is going to have on everybody, where not everybody obviously was going to be getting sick?
Right, there's no doubt. And it's a binary thing. We will have a dramatic slowdown in the economy, a recession, maybe a depression even. That is a certainty. What is not a certainty is that millions of people will die, or that millions of people will even get this disease, or that there won't be a cure or a vaccine for this. And there's already talk about there being a cure. Yeah. So, look, I'd rather place my bet on the possibility that there will be a cure and let the economy roar and at least not cramp it so much. And then let's see what happens. I think the distinction has been so much like, well, we don't want to be Italy. But Italy is only one country among how many 200 or so countries in the world that has dealt with the coronavirus. And why do we always have to look at Italy, which is such a devastating blow for its own reasons? Why can't we be, let's say, like South Korea? They handled it a certain way. Why can't we be like Israel? They're handling it a certain way. We don't have the devastating blow in those countries that we saw in Italy, for example. So I think there's a panic setting in. And panic is never good. Never good. I've never seen where someone says, okay, now it's time to panic. Let's start panicking. It doesn't fly well. At the end, we want the economy to thrive. And there are many more people who will die, frankly. That's also certainty. If we collapse the economy, you're going to have tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people die as a result of an major economic recession like this, whether it's from suicide or an inability to get medical help or otherwise. They just can't survive. So, pick your poison, so to speak. Do you want the poison to be the coronavirus, where there is at least a hope that there will be a positive result with a cure, or the certainty of many hundreds of thousands of people dying in a massive recession? Just pick your poison.
Barak, you're in the media. Your radio show every weekend. A lot of people listen to it. How much do you, or should we have trust in what we're hearing out of the mainstream media right now? Because I got to tell you this. I think there's some good news, and then there seems to be some disconnect between some of these journalists, and we see them in the White House press pool, where they're focused on things like, should you be saying the word Chinese? Okay, where if you've got 30 seconds to get a response from the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, during what undoubtedly may be one of the biggest crises in a century.
Right.
Okay, and you're talking about political correctness. Is that concerning for you as somebody that is in the media right now, is about how we should be getting our news?
Right, it's wasted time. It reminds me of all those Monty Python skits where the Brian character is trying to tell a story and he's trying to tell a parable, and they keep on saying, well, what were their names? What were they wearing at the time? Or the more famous scene where they want to make demands upon the Romans, and the one transgendered apparently says, well, I want to be a woman all of a sudden. It's a non sequitur. There are more important things going on, to your point. And that is a problem. I would like to see our country unified against the virus. If that's the tack that we decide to go against, then let's go together. Let's do this the right way. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing still this partisan divide that is unhealthy for everyone involved. So I worry about that. I hope that answers your question on that.
Yeah, I think it does. And I'm also deeply concerned about a lot of the folks. I mean, everybody's home. They're watching us probably on YouTube or social media, whatever it may be now, and thank you. But they're also getting their news from social media. And there seems to be, I don't know, from your standpoint, your perspective on reliable news versus fake news versus social media and panic and everything else like this. Is there a controlling mechanism you think right now that the social media titans should have, a power grab, if you will, of free speech, what is right, what is not, and what is your concern regarding the civil rights of all of that?
Right.
Free speech.
Right. Look, if you're asking, should there be some sort of purveyor of either a censor or somebody who is going to be able to say, no, that's fake news and you can't relay that. I'm the kind that says, just let it all hang out. The market segmentation of news, I always thought was inevitable, even when I was in business school a long time ago. It's inevitable. Fox News will play to the conservative base, which I tend to watch them, and CNN and MSNBC to the liberal base, and they will always throw their liberal agenda about that. Fox, very much a conservative bent, maybe not as much, I think, compared to CNN and MSNBC. However,
compared to how left they are.
How left they are, exactly right. But let it all hang out. I don't think that there's anyone that's going to be able to go out and say, well, I'm a Walter Cronkite type, and I'm going to tell you the real straight skinny of what's what. Because I don't believe anybody is ever truly neutral. Walter Cronkite included. It turns out that he wasn't as neutral as everyone thought he was. And so this notion that, well, we'll have a real neutral person, no, just let it all hang out. People will figure this out. Now, how do they figure it out the best way? I make a parallel between news outlets and people, generally speaking. So Dave, I'll ask you, you know a person, as I'm talking to you right now, I'm sure you know a person that every time he talks to you, he's full of drama, right? There's that guy. And when he talks to you, you say, okay, John is saying this, but who knows, okay?
You're discounting it to a certain
You discount it right away. There's another person, a woman, we'll call her Sally. And every time she talks to you, you can't trust a word out of her mouth. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Okay, there's another person that every time he talks to you, it's because he wants something from you, right? And so on down the line. There's always that person. And there's, of course, there's a good man like Dave, like yourself. When he says something that he's going to do something, it's accurate. You can take it to the bank. There's that guy. We all have that guy. Same thing is true with the news outlets. Every single one of them has their own personality. And at some point, you look for a Dave, and you say, I'm just going to wait for Dave to tell me what's what. And then Dave tells you what's what, and you're all good to go. That's why in 2016, November 2016, with all the craziness and all the predictions, only Fox News and Breitbart and a couple of other conservative outlets got it really right. And ever since then, I started listening, much more aggressively at least. And even since then, when I tune in once in a while to MSNBC or otherwise, they're spouting off things and it turns out to be wrong so often. Why would I listen to them? So it's not a question about my partisanship. It's not a question of my political leanings. It's a question of, who do I want to trust? Who do I think has provided good information in the past, and who will I presume will have good information in the future? So that's why I say just let it all hang out. Let people decide for themselves.
As people stay home now and they're watching the news, a lot of people are having issues, psychologically speaking.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a pandemic, and an economic crisis, but I think that we're probably now just starting to enter into mental health crises. You talked about the economic impact of people and that suicides are going to go up. Absolutely a given in my mind. Talk to me a little bit about the panic that you're seeing. Like I said, I've been to some stores this week and people are mostly right now just kind of, keeping to themselves, and you can see that the concern and there's fear, but I saw a fight last night at the checkout line. And it didn't get to fisticuffs, but it was screaming and it was right there. We're 5 days into a lockdown.
Wow.
What are we seeing in 2-3 weeks from now? And are you concerned about some kind of civil breakdown?
I am. I don't think that the recipe of scarcity of resources, especially food, and the announcement that law enforcement will not be as strict as it usually is, that's calling for a big recipe for disaster. Now, I don't know if that's what they're planning to do. There's talk about a National Guard being involved at some point to enforce the law.
Which Los Angeles had, by the way, in 1994, right after the earthquake.
Yes.
I remember the guys walking down the street with the M16s.
Right, and I didn't mind that.
Yeah.
I don't mind that so long as they're enforcing the law to make sure there's no looting and things like this.
Right.
Fine. But to enforce people to stay in their homes, I'm not so jiggy with that. I think it's a good idea to have a police presence and even a military presence, if necessary, to make people think twice about stealing from that store, because we cannot have that kind of panic. That's far worse than anything that this virus can throw at us, far worse. We have to balance and we were talking about this before, the amount of deaths that might result from a recession versus the deaths from the virus. There is a difference. I mean, there will be a cost in lives for a recession and for not having enough resources for people. We have to wonder what we're doing, and we have to make a choice.
So what happens in 2 or 3 weeks from now when people don't have money? You as a father, I'm a father, as a mother, or anybody, you need to find food for your kids.
Right.
I mean, we saw what happened in '92 with the riots, and that was just a court case.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about that?
That was a court case, and it was only localized pretty much to Los Angeles. There's a couple of ally cities who decided to do the same thing.
We're talking about Rodney King.
Yeah.
That led to the riots.
look, if people are running out of money completely and they run out of food at the same time, look, there's an expression I say in my law firm, and it has served me well to advise my clients. Desperate people do desperate things. And we have to be cautious about that. We have to understand that if we lead to a panic that in turn leads to a desperation, you're going to see a lot of desperation out in the streets. And that will involve people, like you said, fisticuffs. There'll be real fights there. People will find a roll of toilet paper, as you know, that's pretty scarce these days, and they'll fight over freaking toilet paper.
Yeah.
And it can be very sad. We need to really reevaluate whether this is all worth it. And I just don't know. At some point, people will, I have to ask, is there a point? And I presented this on Twitter and Facebook, and I got very interesting responses. Is there a line that you think it goes too far? And if there is a line, what is it? Clearly you would agree with me that not only should we have martial law, but we should all be in our separate rooms, and we should all be in glass bubbles, and we're going to feed you the food that we think is necessary for you, and we'll let you go to the bathroom when we decide you can go to the bathroom, that sort of thing. We'd say, okay, too far. Okay, it's whoever would be okay with that has got to be nuts. But hopefully the line of too far is much before that.
But how do you change that when the horse has already left the barn? California's locked down, New York's locked down. Breaking news just before we went on the air. Yeah. Illinois is now locked down. They're following suit. I think it's going to be everywhere.
Sure.
So once you've implemented that, how do you pull back from that? And if there's still escalating numbers of people that are getting infected and dying?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the temptation, first of all, I think the various governors are all trying to out-PC each other in the sense of, like, I don't want to be responsible for I don't want to be the one state that didn't quarantine, and now we have the largest number of coronavirus victims. I think that's what's going on there. So there's a panic within the governorships. And now, and conversely, when the time comes to say, look, we've had enough pain, enough difficulties, we need to relax our quarantine, or even give it up altogether, I think a lot of people will be reluctant to do so for the exact same reason. So I think we went into it too early, and maybe unnecessarily, and I think we'll be in it for longer than we should be.
Yeah. I want to talk about all of this leading up to, which I think is really this being a result of everything that's led up to all of this and what we're now seeing happening at a hyper level. Your book, Rise of the Sex Machines, it's a very provocative title. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of views because of the title itself. But what you talk about here is, one of the parts of my earlier question to you was that we may now be in a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
Okay, so people being isolated, people not being able to communicate with each other physically. To draw a kind of an indirect comparison, relationships are already starting to change before this.
Yeah.
Online dating, people not being chivalrous and masculinity being questioned, and all of these different things. And I know I'm throwing a lot of different issues, but this is really what builds up to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so now we're in a position right now where you've got essentially people that are isolated from other human beings.
Right.
This is about robots. This is about the end game of humanity, whereby relationships are no longer going to be consummated in the way that you and I grew up having.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that first before we get into the book specifically and how it relates to the environment we're now currently facing with this pandemic?
I would love to, and it does feed into itself. Look, relationships are everything. I think that relationships are an obligation on our part. If you look at the Old Testament, the New Testament, it's all about relationships, about fostering them. If you think about it, every part of the Bible is in some way teaching about a relationship. Mm-hmm. We need to learn relationships. You're a father, I'm a father, and we remember as kids, our own parents telling us, you need to stand up straight, you need to shake hands the right way, you need to say, how are you? You need to learn how to share. What are they doing? They're fostering the notion of relationships. And that is key. We're losing that sense. We have lost it a long time ago. I think about maybe 20, 30 years ago. It started fraying at the edges, and now it's kind of coming apart at the seams. One of the main things that has caused that to happen is the rise of radical feminism, which in turn has led to the hatred of masculinity, which in turn has led to the blending of the sexes in something called transgenderism, as we all know. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting, Dave, if you were to, there's 57 or so, genders, as they say, or even more than now, but not one of them looks at themselves with an identity to say, I'm pansexual with a twist of lime or whatever, right? But it's all about,
that's the new Budweiser flavor.
Yeah,
pansexual with a twist of lime.
Right? But they don't say, here's what I want to do for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about how they chase their orgasm. Forgive me for being a little bit colorful here,
yeah.
But that's how they chase their orgasm, and that's how they identify themselves now. It is so base now. Whereas 100 years ago, if you were to ask yourself, who are you? You would say, well, I'm a father, I'm a Jew or a Christian, I'm an American, a lover of God, and I'm a lawyer, let's say, or whatever. Now, they're expecting you, in the 70s, they started changing that to your skin color and maybe your national origin. And now it's changed to, how do you chase your sexual thrill? That's your, who are you is, I'm a bisexual, I'm heterosexual, I'm a, whatever they call it, cisgender now.
Yeah.
That's the way you're supposed to look at yourself all of a sudden. Why so? I mean, I see myself first as a lover of God, then as a Jew, and then as a father, and so on. Mm-hmm. Lawyer is maybe the fourth or fifth thing down the line, as I think it should be. They're telling us how to view ourselves. And in all of that, the relationships has really gone away for the variety of reasons that we've been talking about. Then you have the legal issues that we've been talking about how if you so much as look at a woman or say, you look pretty today, well, you might be sued for sexual harassment. And if you do engage in dating, well, there's a lot of sexual harassment opportunities there too. So all of a sudden people are saying, you know what, this relationship business, not so necessary. And that's where the rise of the sex machines kind of comes in. It's not really necessarily just about sex robots. It's about our whole culture moving away from relationships. I could have called it easily the death of relationships, which is more to your question.
Right.
And but that's really what it's about. We are falling apart when it comes to relationships. Now, blending back into your ultimate question is, how does this relate to the coronavirus and the isolation? I wouldn't be surprised that people would market this. In fact, sex machines, I actually, before coming to this interview, I actually did some research and found that the rise of the production of sex machines has gone through the roof recently because of this coronavirus.
Right.
Because, if you're a single male and you're forced to be stuck in your own apartment, maybe a small one-bedroom apartment, life's got to suck. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Right? You need some companionship, and I put that in air quotes. A sex machine or a sex robot, well, you get your jollies that way. At least if you have a girlfriend or a wife, that you've got some sort of opportunity there. But, we're talking about weeks and, as you said, maybe months.
The ironic thing is that they're all made in China.
That's true. That's really true.
You get the Wuhan doll. But I'm deeply concerned. I was on a panel last month on a network called Jubilee Media, and we were doing this thing. There were 6 of us, and we were arguing Me Too. And they classified me as anti-Me Too. I'm not anti-Me Too. I'm against anybody abusing their power in a powerful relationship like that. But I think it's gone too far. People are innocently accused, and those are all the things that came out from that. But one of the things that I discussed in that is that I'm feeling like young men today are having a much harder time engaging the idea of what you and I thought was normal as a rite of passage, and that is just to suck up and get the confidence and stand up straight and go across the room and ask a girl to dance.
Right.
It's a little nerve-wracking for a young male, right? But you do it, and you develop a relationship, and you be kind, and you be chivalrous. I find that to be lacking in culture already today. There's multiple reasons for that. I think some of the I think there's a lot of people that are just, what do you want to call it, beta males. I think that the idea that I don't want to be Me Too'd, I don't want to stare at anybody in the wrong way.
Right.
There's a lot of variables there. But if we are now at a point where we're talking about robots, and realistically speaking, and I checked it out, and you can't go on Drudge Report anymore without seeing an article saying there's new, the technology and artificial intelligence and the way that they look at you, and these things are starting to look real. In 20 years from now, when these things are like, right out of a CGI movie where they look like a real thing, what is that going to do?
I'll take you one step further. The very first intro of this book is, and as you've read, is that in 7 to 10 years' time, I guarantee you'll hear the following phrase over and over again from women: "I've lost my man to a sex robot." You will hear that over and over again. And that's the essence. And the question is, why would I say such a thing? How can this be? It's like one of those movies where you see the end of the movie first, and a man and a woman are killing each other, and then it says 10 years earlier. Right. Like you wonder, how the hell did this happen? How did it get to this point? And they otherwise seem so loving and everything else, and now at the end of the movie, they're sort of killing each other. How is it that this is going to be a thing, where women will be saying, "I lost my man to a sex robot"? And I'm showing it. I show the step-by-step process where will be so inevitable. We have poo-pooed relationships, for one thing. We have made masculinity toxic. The Me Too movement, I'm glad you brought that up, has been so damaging to young men, especially young men, their approach toward romance and sexuality. It has devastated it. There's a whole chapter called Sex is Scary. You and I, when we were young kids, we looked forward to that thing called sex. And it's going to be exciting, it's going to be really neat, and what does it look like, what does it feel like? That's not the way young boys think today. They think of sex as a very scary proposition. We never thought of it as scary. That adjective just did not apply. You may say, well, you might get a disease, okay, but
we had AIDS.
But yeah, well, that's true,
right?
But
you die.
Yeah, but even then, even then, it was not the same thing. This notion that anytime you could have sex with anybody or intimate, just approaching a girl and asking her, she'll say that's harassment. All of a sudden, she has this power over you merely because you're the man and she's the girl, and that's really a recipe for disaster. So it's great that girls have been propped up in society. That's wonderful. My hat's off to them. But feminism has done a lot of destruction, and this notion that
and you have a chapter on that.
Oh yeah, it's feminism was here. That's the notion. It was like Kilroy was here. Yeah. And the devastation it has wrought is uncanny. And one of the things that they tell you is like a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, right? But they really
Gloria Steinem.
Yeah, they really meant it.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? It means that I don't need a relationship. I don't need you. There's plenty of new songs coming out. I forget the name of this woman. She wrote a whole song saying how I don't need a man. I'm good by myself. And that is the new mode of operation. A woman just doesn't need a man. She can have her own thrills. She has her own sex toys. Maybe she'll play around with other girls. If it's a man that she wants, fine, but that's not for relationship purposes. It's just for sexual thrills. And why wouldn't she think this way? They've been thinking this way all this time. That's what they've been encouraged. There's notion of completing yourself with the opposite sex. That's gone. You will not hear that again. And one more emblematic point on this. I want you to compare the movie The Empire Strikes Back, which came out in 1980. Compare that to the latest Star Wars movie, Episode 9, right? What's the major difference between those two movies?
Where do I start? But
I mean, it's not as obvious, but I'll say
what's your point on that?
My point is,
I have a whole bunch of thoughts on this movie.
But when you hear it, it's like, crap, he's right. Here it is. There is no love interest. There's no sexual tension of any kind in Episode 9. In Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and of course the first one, there's plenty of tension. Han Solo and Princess Leia in particular, right? Yeah. Hey baby, you know you want me, right? And she does like him, but when will it come out that she actually loves him, and she does say it.
Right.
And that's part of the whole story. It's exciting. People don't resonate to that.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious now you've mentioned it.
Yeah, right, isn't it?
Why hasn't anybody talked about that?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. The rom-com generally, romantic comedy, has died. There are very few examples that you can point to that are similar to When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle, or The Empire Strikes Back.
Great movies. I love them. As a guy, I love those movies.
But I
pretended to be like, really? I secretly like them.
Yeah, of course.
They were good movies.
It's
very
cool.
well written.
But Hollywood knows what's what.
Yeah.
They're responding to the culture, right? Culture is downstream from values or whatever they call it.
Politics downstream from culture.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And movies reflect our culture.
Yeah.
And look at all the superhero movies. The Avengers in particular, that was such a blockbuster hit. Not one friggin' kiss. Not one. Yeah. And the girls are powerful. There's the presence of women. Great, fine. And she's lifting up a spaceship. Okay, fine. Who cares? Yeah. The point is that there's just none of this involved. It's all about, you got to take care of your own needs. And when you have a culture that says, take care of your own needs, well then why not a sex robot? Right? I mean, you don't have to have a relationship with a robot.
It becomes what you said before we were going here, and that it essentially becomes just a very expensive masturbation tool, though, isn't it?
That's what it is. That's all it is. And it's really interesting, Dave, and this is the ultimate question that I ask a lot of and I did some research in terms of the attitudes of people toward this advent of sex robots, because it's a thing. It is definitely coming. Mm-hmm. And this is not like Barak Lurie's great prediction. I'm just saying it's there, and it'll destroy relationships.
Yeah.
Not the sex robot themselves. I want to make that very clear. I'm not advocating for the prohibition of sex robots or anything like that. Sex robots are merely a reflection of us.
It's a sociology.
Yeah, that's it. They're meeting a demand.
What?
So, but to your point, we were talking about the movies and everything else. Mm-hmm. That I don't know. I think when I ask people, I ask men especially, I told them about this advent of sex robots, and what do you think about that? And I noticed a strong correlation between two kinds of men. I'm not talking about the women, just the men. There are those who love God, for whom God is a very big part of their lives, as it is for me, and those for whom God is totally irrelevant, or it's a very small part of their lives. The answer, when I asked about the robots to the secular men, they all said the same thing. Every single one. They said, I can't wait. Which really was a shocker to me. Mm-hmm. To me, like we just said, it's a very sophisticated masturbatory device. But let's not fool ourselves. Cheap. Yeah, and not cheap apparently either.
Right.
It'll go down in price. That's part of the reason why there'll be so many more of them. Yeah. Just like your iPhone went down in price, and from the original cell phone models of the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that these men love this idea, and it's because they just don't view relationships the way that you and I might view relationships. The men who tend to have a very strong religious identity, to them, the sex robots is anathema. I mean, they might try it like once or twice, but to actually treat it like a serious thing and have a relationship with it, and I really mean it, they think they're having relationships with these robots. That to them is so freaking bizarre.
Well, you talk about the artificial intelligence and how that's going to exponentially improve. We talk about Moore's law and the processing and it's only going to be a matter of time before you're going to be able to have a conversation with a machine.
They already do have.
I mean, realistically, feeling it, and the humanity and the skin and the hair, and right now they look like the eyes. It just doesn't look real to me, but. The one that I bought. No, I'm kidding. The thing, I'm too cheap to buy these things. Right. I couldn't spend.
Most people couldn't afford them. I think, yeah.
But going back to your point, though, you talk about the rom-coms, okay, and all of this is intertwined. Okay, politics and culture and sociology and psychology. Where did that switch happen? When did that switch happen, and what precipitated it?
Oh, I could easily tell you. The rise of feminism, the Gloria Steinem type feminism.
But we still had the rom-coms in the 90s.
Oh, we did. No, it took a long time for it to eventually evaporate.
Steinem goes back to the 60s.
Yeah, I know. She goes back to the 60s, but it's a slow burn. It doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. Nothing does. But at some point, it went from we can be like men, to we don't need men, to we are better than men, and finally we hate men and men have been toxic, right? And then finally, somewhere along the line, there's no such thing as a difference in gender. That last one, that was the one that really busted the whole thing out open. Because if you're no different than a woman, and vice versa, then why would you need a woman?
They're teaching that to kids in classes now.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Because if your plumbing doesn't determine your gender.
Right. If your plumbing doesn't determine your gender, and you're just the same as a girl when you're a boy, and vice versa, I mean, the notion of needing someone, no one is teaching their kids, like one day you'll meet, a little girl, one day you'll meet a wonderful man and you'll just know that you love him and he just seems to know what you're thinking.
The idea of the white picket fence in the house and the security, that's out of the window.
Gone. It's gone. It's, everyone is on their own. It's the last man standing, and every man for himself or woman for herself, so to speak.
Right.
And that's what, so it's a, I mean, forgive me for the phrasing, but it's a masturbatory culture that's going on now. And this notion of sex being a thing you do as pleasant as eating some ice cream. And you would talk about it in the same way, and we're talking about it pretty openly here, but they are now teaching in the schools in the same way about that they might teach eating ice cream in the schools. Or something else like that. That's a scary thing to me. Sex is different, and it should always be different. There should be an excitement toward the notion of sex and what it means. And then we forget one very important thing. Why do we have sex? I mean, why is sex so pleasurable? I mean, if the notion is, hey, obvious, Barak, the reason why is we wanted to make it pleasurable to entice people to have sex and therefore have reproduction and have more kids. Well, okay, I get that. But if that's the case, then why is sex so pleasurable? Why is it on a scale of 1 to 10, why is it a 30, right? I mean, when an astronaut goes into space, sometimes a reporter will go to him and say, how was it? And he'll say, better than sex, man, better than sex.
Yeah.
But you and I know, nah, it wasn't.
Yeah.
it couldn't possibly be right. Yeah. Why does it have to be that intense? Right? I mean, you can get me to do a lot of things with a really good cappuccino.
Yeah.
Really. Okay.
Well, can I just, not to be contrarian here, I think a lot of people may not be having good sex. I think some of us that have had incredible, mind-blowing sex, the stuff that you can write books about and poetry and songs, you know what that is.
Right.
It's like, flying in first class, and then all of a sudden your income goes down, and now you got to go back to coach. Right. You remember what that first class experience is like, and you're ruined for life.
That's a good analogy. I totally agree. You get spoiled. But look, I mean, I think everyone, hopefully has had some really good, decent sex, and they understand how powerful it is. But they're playing with. They want that extraordinary pleasure, but they don't want the burden that goes with it, which is a relationship.
And there's responsibilities. Right. You got to make phone calls. You got to date and go to court, and you got to, all those things.
I think that just to wrap up this one line of thinking is that why is it a 30? That question. I think it's because, and it's only one answer. And it's not Barak Lurie's interpretation, by the way. It's from the sages of old, both Christian and Jewish. They all tell you the same thing.
Not the sage of South Central.
No, although he's great. Maybe he'll say the same thing. I don't know.
We saw him last week, Larry Elder.
We love Larry. He's great. Love you, Larry. But anyway, the reason why is that God is rewarding us. God is giving us an opening, a vision into His creation, because you are participating in creation, and that's why it's so intensely pleasurable. What could be more pleasurable than experiencing something godly like that? That's why the notion of having children is such a religious issue.
You talk about this in the book as well. It's a chapter, and you talk about the narcissism that we experience today. Listen, people have always been narcissistic. Everybody's self-serving. Everybody needs to take care of themselves. But that seems to have been unbalanced in recent years. What is that? What are we looking at? And what is the impact right now we're having of that on relationships?
Well, yeah. Narcissism almost by definition, since you're only focusing on yourself, And it's this notion of I'm great on my own. I don't have to be anything. I'm me or whatever it is. The little chance they have in nursery school. I'm just great as I am. Okay, look, the self-esteem movement and such like that.
I'm okay, you're okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Right, Est, I think it was, back in the 70s.
But it's really narcissistic.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe you're not okay. Maybe you need somebody to help you.
Yeah.
And maybe you have obligations to others. How about that? Right?
Yeah.
And that you can do with the relationship. And that's how we really better ourselves, isn't it? I mean, I consider myself to be a hard-driving man, and I consider myself to be creative. But my wife makes me a better man. And hopefully I make her a better woman. Mm-hmm. Right? We bring things out in each other, and that's what a relationship is. We're both rowing this boat, and if only one of us is rowing, we're going to go around in circles.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is with this narcissistic culture. Extremely dangerous, and we'll end up talk about self-isolating, right? Mm-hmm. Talk about what is it? Distant. What are we doing now?
Social distancing.
Social distancing.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to see that on steroids. Because why would you ever need to be
so
with
let's
anybody?
talk about that. How does this end? What's the trajectory, and what does it look like? What does humanity look like? Are we going to procreate eventually anymore? I mean,
well, no. The answer is no, because and that's part of another reason why sex robots will be so appealing. Because on the one hand, you have the sexual drive. Yeah. On the other hand, there's the scare of being sued, right?
Yeah.
If you even approach a woman, let alone have sex with her. And then there's the threat that you might get a disease, and of course that you might have an unwanted pregnancy, or you might get divorced and you just can't stand the woman that you're with.
Yeah.
So sex robots answers all these questions, all of them, all at once. And to add, to say nothing of the fact that she won't get older on you, she won't get fatter on you,
right?
She won't have a temper tantrum, she won't get emotional. I don't mean to throw out cliches, but that's the way a man might think, mm-hmm. right? You and I, when we're thinking about having a relationship with a woman, we think about growing older with her. We're okay with her changing.
Yeah.
We understand that that's part of the process.
Because we certainly change.
we do, and we do too, right?
Yeah.
But that's part of the joy. That's what a real relationship is all about, is that glorious change. But these men who can't wait for the robots, as it were,
right.
These are people that just want what they want right now. And they don't want the change. They don't want to be challenged either, for that matter.
Yeah.
Sex robots provides all of that for that narcissistic culture that we are racing towards.
Talk to me about how this is going to impact women. And there's going to be sex machines for women. They already are now.
There are. I've been challenged on that because there are sex toys, right? For women, there's dildos and such like that.
Right. But they're building dolls now that
for
have
women.
all the equipment.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Women, for every 10 sex robots for men, in other words, female sex robots for men, there's only one male robot for women. It's very similar.
The marketplace is not there.
It's not there. It's very similar to brothels, right? I mean, just like in the good old days. There are a couple of brothels where that's only meant for the women.
Wait a minute. Are you saying men and women are different, Barak?
No, you heard it here first on Whiskey Politics.
Wait a minute.
Mind blown. I know. It's the great relearning, isn't it? We have to teach these things over and over. We have to discover the obvious.
Yeah.
And that's a shame. It shouldn't be. We should be learning to push forward with relationships. We should be learning to push forward with having a lot of children. Family is paramount. We cannot pretend that men and women are the same. We just can't. We do so at our own peril of our civilization.
I appreciate you taking the time. A couple of last points here for you. And by the way, everybody check out Barak Lurie's book, Rise of the Sex Machines. This is a bestseller.
Yes.
Congratulations.
I'm very lucky.
Yeah, congratulations.
A surprise, the bestseller for me.
Ben Shapiro at the top here, folks. Barak Lurie is a terrific thinker, and you are. And let me just tell you right now, if the sex machines look like her, I could be persuaded. But talk to me a little bit about, I like to look at things from a macro perspective and a micro perspective as well. You've got sons, I've got sons, I've got one in college, one in middle school. How, as a parent, mother or father, and obviously as a perspective from a father, we can talk about that. How do we talk to our sons today, that are now coming up, the Gen Zs and so on, to really bring them back to the understandings of how we grew up and developed relationships?
I love this question, and it is such an important question because unless we do something about it as fathers, as parents, but especially as fathers, how to look at women and how to look forward to a relationship and look forward, yes, to sex. We'll be dooming our sons to the same fate that everyone else is, okay? So I do with my son, who's now 14. Same. We have apparently kids who are the same age, and I've got another boy who's not even 8 yet. But with my 14-year-old especially, I've been for the past 5 years talking about how great it is to one day be married to a special lady that you will feel so connected to, that you should have a lot of kids, that your family is paramount to everything, that God should be the center of your family, and that women are different. Teach them the rules of how you should stand up when a lady walks into the room, how you hold the door open for her. Yes, it may not seem fair, but in fact, it is fair, because women live in a very different world than you and I do. We don't have to look over our shoulders every time they walk anywhere. Even when they go into an elevator, they have to worry, okay, here I am with one man, who knows what he's going to do? We don't have to worry about that. And because of that, we need to teach our young men to respect ladies and to see them as special. And if we do that, it's really healthy. And it's for the boys, by the way. These rules of chivalry, it's not for the women. Right. It affects the women, of course, right, but it's for the boys. It's teaching them to constantly drill into them this notion, this habit, that women are different. And if you do so, you won't have a Me Too movement. You won't have a Me Too problem, at least. Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I was raised to be very chivalrous. I've always been chivalrous. I treat people the way that I want to be treated, golden rule, but it's more important than that. I look at women in particular as somebody that you should respect because of essentially the fact, and this is sexist, because what you just said, there's going to be people out there that are going to be on the comment boards and going to say that's sexism, that's masochism, this and that men and women are equal. The fact of the matter is, however, all the things that you talked about, and I want to protect. I think that's ingrained in men.
Yep.
I want to be the protector. Yep. Listen, my ex-wife and I were very close, good co-parents. 5 minutes apart. Our number one focus is our kids. I braved the crowds last night to make sure that they had food. I mean, this is what we do. We're hunters-gatherers. And that was instinctive of me because I want to make sure that they're okay with this crisis that we're currently in right now because the shelves are half empty. That doesn't go away. I thought that was more biological. What you're talking about, this shift, is it more environmental? Is that more how people are just being raised today, do you think, to shift that?
Yes, they are shifting it. They are being told that all of their biological instincts, like you're talking about, are somehow a fraud, that it's sociologically learned. So you can unlearn them. And so they teach young boys, especially, and white boys for that matter, white Christian boys, that they're evil, that they've got something wrong with them, and that they are inherently toxic and they need to think more like girls. Mm-hmm. And in fact, our boys, if we were to leave them alone in school, they would be raised as girls. Yeah. They'd be taught about sharing and how to problem solve, but never do they teach about how to fight evil. That's a thing that resonates to you and to me. They don't teach that in school anymore. They teach all feminine things. We even had my child, the young one. We had our nursery school teachers call us in on a very important topic, don't you know? Because our boy, and we were really worried because our boy is such a great kid. What went wrong? And they said, we're concerned because when we asked him why he chose certain colors to draw his car, he was not able to explain why he chose the colors. And I said, are you serious? He goes, yeah, that's very important. Sally, and they're referring to girls, they were able to explain why because of how it touched their feelings. And I said, you're being absurd. This is, boys don't give a crap about colors. He picked it up because that was the first one available to him. That's why. And they didn't understand that. And I said, let me prove it to you. I said, you are constantly texting with your girlfriends, right? Yes. Do you notice any of your male friends, when they text you, do they use a lot of emojis? other than a smiley face or a frown face. Mm-hmm. And then they thought, come to think of it, no, we never do. The men don't do that.
Yeah.
And they're right, we don't. There's nothing wrong with it.
I never used to. I'm starting to more now. I hate it.
I just use confused look, smiley face.
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4.
Face. Yeah, 3 or 4, exactly.
Right.
The women, are as embracing of emojis. They love emojis.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But in the same way, they know the color mauve.
Because it's
fuchsia.
What is emoji? Yeah. What is an emoji? It is an emoticon, emotional.
Right.
It's based upon the emotions.
Yep. That's what it is.
Right.
And it's all emotional in school now. How does it make you feel? And it's hysterical in some ways, and it's sad in other ways. So the boys are just bored to death. And the only way to teach them the right way is to teach them about, what would you do in this situation? Who would you, standing up to a bully, classic example.
Yeah.
But what do you, how do you, you're George Washington right now. The Brits are over there, and you know that you have to fight for your freedom. What do you do? Not how do you feel, but what do you do?
Right.
And that's why there's a big disparity between boys and girls. But the boys are checking out. It's a really big problem.
Yeah.
And because of that, we need to re-educate them to embrace their boyness and to be excited about it.
I think that's wise words. Yeah. And as parents, I think this is our ultimate responsibility right now, because I thought that this was just normal, you just grow up and this is the way things are. I was always into girls. I was into girls before I knew I was into girls, right? Yeah. It's just, and it was a biological thing for me. Yeah. I don't see that with the younger generation today. And, it deeply concerns me, but I think as fathers, our responsibility is to make sure that we're raising gentlemen.
Yeah.
Chivalry still applies. And the girls that take exception to that, they're not anybody that you want to be with anyway.
Oh, I so agree. You don't, the funny thing is, all the women watching this, all the girls watching this, they can yell and scream all they want. Yeah. But deep down, they cannot lie to themselves at the end of the day. Yeah. Deep down, they really do want a man who will protect them one day, who will be there just in case. This just in case concept. Yep.
And as shit goes down right now, as we're seeing in culture and society, you know what?
Yeah, you want a man.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm going to go out and fight the crowds for you, and I do that because I want to protect you.
Yeah.
And that's our instinct, and I'm hoping that the younger generation has that. Barak, this is going to be, the link is on Amazon.com.
Yes.
Everybody check out the link below, right down there. You can see it. And tell us, everybody else, where they can find you on social media.
They can find me on social media at lurie.law.com.
Okay.
Lurie-law.com. And they can also find it at atheismkills.com, but more importantly, to access the books, Amazon.com.
Okay, and also they can hear you on the weekends on
AM 870, The Answer, on KRLA, and that's in Sundays, 10 to 11 in the morning.
A fascinating show, excellent, very important voice right now. Greatly appreciate it. I'll shake your hand.
But we won't do that.
We won't do that. And but I thank you for coming into this brand new studio, folks, and we're going to be talking about that more in future episodes here as well. Barak, Lurie, greatly appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And folks, we'll be back again very soon. We're going to have Stephen Moore on next week. We're going to talk about the economic implosion that is happening right now. Everybody, stay safe, stay home, wash your hands, and we'll be back again real soon at Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman. Cheers. Of course, we can't do Whiskey Politics without having some whiskey. Cheers. A social distancing cheers. Cheers, everybody. That wasn't whiskey.
It was not.
That was.
I thought it was.
Saint Germain is a liqueur, not whiskey.
So now I feel like we really should get some whiskey.
So,
all right, I gotta get some whiskey.
I don't know, man. That's.
I'll pour it into this.
That's some sweet stuff right there.
All right. So you're done with that one.
All right. All right. Everybody stay safe. And you know what? Have a glass with us. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, that's whiskey. That's some good stuff there.
That's really fun.
That's nice. Cheers, everyone.